A chilling wind of geopolitical uncertainty sweeps across the globe. The once stable balance of power is now a precarious tightrope, with nations teetering on the edge. The alliance between Russia and North Korea, forged in the fires of mutual ambition, has cast a long, ominous shadow over the Asia-Pacific region and beyond. But the real question, the one that keeps world leaders up at night, is this. Is China, the sleeping dragon of the East, about to awaken with a vengeance? This is not just another news update. It's a tectonic shift, a calculated maneuver that could redefine global alliances and ignite a new era of conflict. This is a tale of deception, shifting allegiances, and the potential for a world thrown into disarray. Are you ready to delve into the heart of this unfolding drama? Let's begin, but remember, stay with us until the very end because critical conclusions await you there. Chapter 1: The Shifting Sands of Alliance. This narrative of international relations unfolds in 5 critical chapters. June 2024 marked a significant turning point, a moment when the agreement between Russia and North Korea sent shockwaves across the globe, especially through the Asia-Pacific region and Eastern Europe. This alliance sparked deep concerns for China. The cooperation between Moscow and Pyongyang intensified, with an exchange of weapons and technology, drawing sharp reactions from South Korea and Ukraine. China, visibly silent, was in fact deeply troubled by these developments. They didn't support either side's actions, a calculated move that masked their growing apprehension. The situation escalated further when Kim Jong-un, the leader of North Korea, sent over 11,000 troops to Russia to support its war efforts in Ukraine. This dramatic commitment to Russia's front lines had an unprecedented impact, triggering diverse responses worldwide. The most striking consequence of this, however, was its effect on the relationship between major global powers and the delicate balance of power. China, caught in this vortex, found itself in an uncomfortable position. While publicly keeping quiet, China was in fact infuriated by North Korea's move to deploy troops to Russia. This hazardous alliance created a scenario where China faced significant challenges in both Western and Eastern blocs, being seen as part of the Russia-North Korea axis. This put China in a precarious position with its major technology partners, such as Japan, South Korea, and the United States. The heightened tensions, driven by North Korea's military support for Russia and China's displeasure, have brought about an international crisis. It's almost as if Kim Jong-un masterfully manipulated Xi Jinping and China, placing them in a difficult and unwanted position. But why was China so unhappy if these 3 nations were ostensibly allies against NATO and the EU? The fact that Russia, North Korea, and China portray a unified front in public is deceptive. Behind the scenes, the situation is dramatically different. Chapter 2: China's Discontent and Economic Vulnerability. It's very possible that the Beijing government believed it was losing control of Asia and the Eastern Bloc, especially after Western sanctions hit China for its military cooperation with the Moscow-Pyongyang regime. This is a significant problem for the Chinese economy. China, feeling it had gained nothing from this alliance, began to distance itself from the West. Putin and Kim Jong-un's military agreement had inadvertently transformed China into a target of Western sanctions. This has forced China to gradually separate itself from the Russia-North Korea alliance. Let's examine how this military alliance between North Korea and Russia is reshaping international relations. What countermeasures is Beijing preparing, and what are the West's strategies? But before we go deeper into this, please like and subscribe to our channel and enable notifications so you're always up to date on our latest videos. For the past decade, China has become increasingly concerned about its diminishing influence over North Korea and Pyongyang's failure to contain its nuclear aspirations. These concerns have intensified this year as North Korea has significantly improved its ties with Russia. In June, Kim Jong-un and Vladimir Putin formalized a new alliance agreement, pledging mutual military assistance if either country is attacked. In October, Pyongyang deployed troops to Russia to support the conflict in Ukraine, building on the months of weapons and ammunition shipments they have been providing to Moscow since August 2023. The Chinese government has remained silent on North Korea's alliance with Russia and its support for the war in Ukraine. However, within Beijing, There is a growing debate over China's loss of initiative in its trilateral relations with North Korea and Russia. For veteran diplomats and historians, the resurgence of the North Korea-Russia military alliance is a major threat to regional stability in Northeast Asia. This raises a crucial question. Has China been manipulated once again by Pyongyang and Moscow, just as it was at the outbreak of the Korean War in June 1950? Chapter 3. Echoes of the Past and China's Strategic Dilemma. The Korean War in 1950 was not in Mao Zedong's plans. Just a year after the founding of the People's Republic of China, Mao and the new PRC leadership had the clear priority of unifying Taiwan with mainland China, and not getting involved in Kim Il-sung's ambitions in the Korean peninsula. Both Mao and Kim sought Stalin's support, and Stalin eventually decided to support Pyongyang's goals over Beijing's. Angered by Mao's hesitations, Kim concealed his war preparations from Beijing. Just 3 days after launching his attack on South Korea, Kim finally informed the Chinese leadership about the conflict. Mao was outraged, and when Kim's forces were defeated by the US troops after the Incheon landing in September 1950, he had no choice but to save North Korea by entering a war that Kim and Stalin had forced upon him. Today's Chinese leadership might be feeling similarly betrayed by North Korea's military alliance with Russia. Just like his grandfather in 1950, Kim Jong-un gave little consideration to China's interests when he turned to Putin. However, China's subdued response to both Pyongyang and Moscow is especially striking considering China's current position as the dominant power in this dynamic. Unlike the Mao era, the present Chinese leadership does not require Putin's approval for its strategic decisions. The revolutionary ties between Beijing and Pyongyang, which once united Mao and Kim, have long since faded away. As analysts often point out, Putin's attrition war in Ukraine has reduced Russia to a junior, even a begging partner in its relations with China. In contrast to 1950, when the Soviet Union vastly outmatched China, North Korea, like Russia, is now seen as China's junior partner. Beijing holds a dominant position over the Pyongyang regime. Economically, North Korea is deeply dependent on China, relying on Beijing for 90% of its trade and a significant portion of its energy imports. In the post-Cold War era, Chinese economic support is essential for North Korea, which remains one of the poorest and most isolated countries in the world, and subject to increasing international sanctions. Chapter 4. China's grip and North Korea's dependence. Experts claim China seeks to maintain North Korea's economic dependency. Beijing has been Pyongyang's largest trading partner for over 2 decades, accounting for approximately 98% of North Korea's official imports and exports in 2023. This demonstrates that Beijing has a great deal of economic control over Pyongyang. China also directly provides aid to Pyongyang, mainly food and energy assistance, which is vitally important. According to Western analysis, famine devastated the country in the 1990s, resulting in over 3 million deaths. Today, UN agencies estimate that over 40% of the population, approximately 11 million people, are undernourished. Food insecurity and related health issues have been intensified by North Korea's self-imposed isolation during the COVID-19 pandemic. In 2022, at the height of the pandemic, Kim rejected vaccine offers from the UN-backed COVAX initiative and China. However, North Korea later released vaccines that year, with analysts suggesting that China was the likely supplier. China has also expanded its physical ties with North Korea. In 2015, it opened a bulk cargo and container shipping route to increase North Korean coal exports to China. It also established a high-speed railway route connecting the Chinese border city of Dandong to Shenyang, the provincial capital of China's Liaoning province. In the same year, the Guomenwan border trade zone opened in Dandong, with the aim of promoting bilateral economic exchanges. Interestingly, despite China's importance to North Korea, Kim Jong-un still favors Putin and is attempting to exclude Beijing from the alliance. What are China's priorities regarding North Korea? China has overlapping and at times conflicting interests in the Korean peninsula, particularly as the dynamics of the region are changing. For example, while China claims it wants to see North Korea denuclearize to avoid a regional arms race or war, it vetoed sanctions in response to Pyongyang's missile testing regime in 2022. China has long viewed North Korea's reliance on nuclear weapons as destabilizing for the region, but believes denuclearization cannot be achieved quickly. While China demands peace and denuclearization, it ignores calls from the US and its allies to use its influence over North Korea to push for that goal. With US-China relations remaining strained, the potential for policy coordination has decreased. Chapter 5: The Looming Shadow of Conflict and the Uncertain Future. Chinese analysts view North Korea's nuclear developments as a response to US hostility in the region and urge the US to improve relations with North Korea to begin denuclearization talks. China, on the other hand, sees stability on the Korean peninsula as its main goal. Unlike his predecessors, Xi's Korea policy prioritizes preventing the collapse of the Kim regime and avoiding an unwanted war in the region, which could undermine China's security interests. At the same time, his support for North Korea, a one-party authoritarian state, strengthens the geopolitical buffer between China and South Korea, a pluralist democracy that is also a US treaty ally and host to approximately 2,800 US troops. The main beneficiary of these relationships is North Korea, a junior partner of China that cooperates with Russia. North Korea is in a situation where it needs China, but Kim Jong-un appears to prefer Putin more than Xi. Some data, however, suggests this strategy could cause severe damage to the Pyongyang regime. China aims to limit the flow of irregular migrants and refugees from North Korea, especially as the region faces extreme weather events and natural disasters exacerbated by climate change. Unofficial estimates suggest that 50,000 to 200,000 North Korean defectors live in China. Separate reports indicate that up to 40,000 North Korean workers have been sent by the government to work in Chinese factories to generate income. Many North Koreans escape through China before moving to other parts of Asia, including South Korea. China's repatriation of North Koreans has faced ongoing condemnation from human rights groups. However, tightened border controls under Kim Jong-un have significantly reduced the flow of defectors. If Kim and Putin continue to isolate Xi through their military cooperation, the Beijing regime might intensify its strategy of repatriating North Korean defectors. For North Korea, China's most important contribution is military security. China and North Korea's 1961 Mutual Defense Treaty commits the signatories to offer military assistance to each other if attacked. This is Beijing's sole formal security commitment, and China has stated in the past that it will protect North Korea if the United States and South Korea initiate an attack. However, Beijing has hinted that its treaty obligations would not apply if Pyongyang began the hostilities, and that it would remain neutral. Some analysts believe that despite their differences, China and North Korea's shared ideology and one-party rule influenced their military relationship. When the Mutual Defense Treaty was renewed in 2021, North Korean media called the move a powerful weapon against imperialism and the defense of socialism. Nevertheless, it's true that Beijing's military support for Pyongyang will diminish as North Korea aligns more closely with Russia. Chapter 6: The Shifting Sands of Power and a Potential Showdown. Military contributions are so important that North Korea in particular should remember the significance of this situation by looking back at past history and remembering how China's support would have changed things. The 1950s would be a good example to use to prove this. In 1950, Northeast Asia was divided into two opposing camps, the Soviet Union, China, and North Korea on one side, against the US, Japan, and South Korea on the other. It was precisely because of this perceived military and ideological divide that Kim Il-sung secured Stalin's support for the unification plan. During the Cold War, both North Korea and Russia sought China's support. Both capitals understand that China has a deep-seated aversion to a new Cold War with the United States. But they also believe that increasing US-China tensions have made Beijing more eager to maintain its allegiances. This pressure is exacerbated by China's deep historical ties and important security interests in both countries. Stable relations with Moscow and Pyongyang remain critical for Beijing to secure its 2,672-mile border with Russia and its 882-mile border with North Korea. This dynamic is designed to narrow China's strategic options while expanding Moscow and Pyongyang's room to maneuver. Both capitals now see an opportunity to leverage Beijing's growing fear of isolation in its battle with Washington. Despite Beijing's uncomfortable implications for its own relations with Pyongyang, a process of China's unrestricted partnership with Russia, its neutral stance on Ukraine, and its acceptance of the Russia-North Korea alliance is beginning. Therefore, China's first warning may not be directed at Russia at all, but at North Korea. While China's 1961 military alliance agreement with North Korea remains in force, Beijing has been careful to avoid any public reference to North Korea as an ally. The Korean War analogy, like all historical analogies, has its limits. Despite structural similarities, the power dynamics of today are vastly different. Most importantly, China now has decisive power advantages over both Russia and North Korea. This makes Beijing's passive stance all the more perplexing. Chapter 7. The Unexpected Revelation. In fact, China's failure to shape events is not due to weakness, but to its unwillingness to use its power. Beijing seems reluctant to challenge Putin or Kim, which highlights a peculiar diplomatic shyness where assertiveness would be more appropriate. Beijing's passive attitude might stem from a deep-seated strategic culture that begins by analyzing broad structural trends. No smart strategist can overlook such limitations, but this focus often leads to overly cautious and reactive policies. This defensive thinking makes China vulnerable to the bold opportunism of North Korea and Russia. Chinese politicians are justified in worrying about losing influence over North Korea and Russia. The obvious solution for military strategists close to Beijing is to use China's significant power in a more decisive manner and take more initiative. While Mao displayed considerable initiative as a leader, Deng Xiaoping may offer a more relevant model for today's challenges in North Korea policy. In December 1985, Deng set out a new plan to draw lessons from the relationship with North Korea. According to military sources close to Beijing, China should learn from its defensive, risk-averse stance towards North Korea. In reality, ties between China and North Korea were never so weak. China and North Korea have had contact for 75 years, and both communist states formed a nexus in Northeast Asia shortly after their establishment following the Second World War. Although the relationship has remained somewhat stable, it has also experienced constant tensions and consistent mutual distrust. Despite their geographic closeness and ideological similarities, China-North Korea relations experienced occasional tensions during the Cold War, as North Korea attempted to put pressure on China in relation to Russia. Tensions over the implementation of socialism in the 1960s, Pyongyang's desire for self-sufficiency, and China's growing economic links with South Korea became more visible in the 1980s. In 2018, Beijing attempted to repair relations with Pyongyang, following a surprise announcement by experts that a summit between North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and U.S. President Donald Trump would take place earlier that year. Chapter 8. The Uncertain Path Ahead. President Xi Jinping and Kim reiterated their dedication to denuclearization during their first meeting in March 2018, and Xi supported Kim's willingness to engage in dialogue with the United States. Xi was welcomed in Pyongyang in 2019, the first visit by a Chinese leader to North Korea since 2005. In 2021, the two countries renewed their 60-year-old mutual defense pact for another 20 years. However, relations between the two countries have recently cooled as North Korea has turned to Russia as an alternative strategic partner. As we reach the end of 2024, we are now in a very different period. While North Korea may try to double-cross China and isolate itself from the international arena by siding with Russia, the Pyongyang regime will ultimately feel much more powerless without Beijing's shadow. Kim's game with Putin is likely to cause North Korea a lot of problems with Xi's stronger economic resources and political reach. Many analysts suggest that North Korea is now more of a burden than a valuable ally for China. China may use its power to get rid of this burden in the future. Russia, on the other hand, may attempt to get its share from this process. China-North Korea relations are expected to deteriorate, and which side Putin favors may be determined by the ongoing war in Ukraine. In short, China may be at the helm in determining the future of North Korea, and then Russia's alternative political and military strategies, despite the military scenario that Kim is trying to create with Putin. Thank you for watching. So, what have we learned from this complex web of alliances and betrayals? We've seen that the seemingly unified front of Russia, North Korea, and China is nothing more than a carefully constructed facade. China, far from being a willing partner, finds itself increasingly sidelined, its interests and influence undermined by the actions of its supposed allies. But the real twist, the unexpected climax to this narrative, lies not in what has happened, but in what might happen next. The stage is set for a potential showdown, a clash of wills that could reshape the global order. What will China's response be to the betrayal by North Korea and Russia? Will it take control of this situation by finally using its considerable power? Will a new balance of power emerge, or will we find ourselves on the brink of a new conflict? Only time will tell, so stay tuned for future updates on this rapidly evolving global drama.